First or second? First. Nathaniel?
Pardon? So this is the story of Saul when he's instructed by Nathan to again go and attack the Amalekites. And you know this story. So they're told to destroy everyone. Verse 3, men, women, children, babies, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, donkeys. They're not to leave anything untouched. And so the battle goes on, and they slaughter the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Sur, east of Egypt. And he captured who? The king Agag, the Amalekite king, but completely destroyed everyone else. So how is Haman on the scene at this period of history?
He's a descendant of this king that wasn't destroyed, was supposed to be destroyed because he was a fierce enemy of the Israelites.
Yes.
Yet he wasn't destroyed, so the enmity continued.
Yes. And God is determined, and keep that in mind here in this story. God is determined that he is going to do something with this nation who asserts themselves against his throne. Okay. Now, can I bring something interesting that we didn't cover last week? It's something very, very interesting about Mordecai. And it kind of sets us up. What does it tell us in chapter 2 about Mordecai? Who is he? Verse 5. Someone read that for us. Verse 5.
When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him
No,
honor
verse 5 of chapter 2.
of Esther.
Yes.
Verse 5 of chapter 2. Okay, I was at 3:5. Go back. So maybe somebody else have it quicker than me.
Okay.
Now at the fortress of Susa, there was a certain Jew named Mordecai, son of Jair. He was from the tribe of Benjamin and was a descendant of Kish and Shimei.
Okay,
Want me to keep going?
that's good enough.
Okay.
So who was Kish?
Benjaminite.
Saul,
Father of
Saul's
King Saul.
father.
Right.
So,
Kish was King Saul's father. Okay, so what do you have developing here in this story?
Two powers coming together.
yeah.
Descendant
A
versus
reason for the
descendant.
conflict.
Yes, you have
Enemies.
these arch enemies, descendants of arch enemies being played out in this story. Have you ever seen that in the story before? I was shocked as I'm unpacking these. So we know why Mordecai refused to bow down to Haman. That's not just a casual telling of this story.
Well,
Okay. Pardon?
there's also the point, this is in my notes, that Israel had been commanded by God to destroy the Amalekites. And he was not gonna kneel before the wicked Haman.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge Haman as a god, is what it says.
Yes. So how could Mordecai, knowing the history that he knew,
Mhm.
how could he in any conscience bow down and worship, or bow down and honor someone that God hated? That was an evil thing. Okay. So now let's look at who Haman is. What characteristics does he manifest in this story as we read on? And I'll read a significant portion there, and then let's talk about the characteristics that you see. And let me make the point that Haman is the most developed character in all of Scripture who represents Satan.
Represents what?
Represents Satan. And And you will see not only what Haman intends to do, but what Satan intends to do in the story. So we're going to pick it up. Verse 3. Then the palace officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" They spoke to him day after day, but still he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this to see if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. Now, can you imagine what's going on? I mean, here, this judge, Mordecai, is sitting outside the gate, and people are noticing that he's not bowing down, and they're getting aggravated. They're getting upset about this. And they don't want the king showing up in their offices. You know, so they're a little self-protective. Mordecai, what are you up to here, you know? So when Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. How is it that Mordecai didn't notice before? What was happening with Mordecai that he didn't notice?
He was too consumed with his ego.
I'm sorry, not Mordecai, Haman.
He was too consumed with his ego.
Okay, so he's kind of oblivious, isn't he, to what's going on? Someone else had to bring it to his attention. And so when he brings it to his attention, what is Mordecai's response?
He decided to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes.
Okay, but his first response is what?
I'm a Jew, I can't bow down to him.
Okay, notice what the text says, verse 5. He was filled with
Rage.
rage. He was filled with rage. This is a violent reaction. This is not just upset. It's a violent reaction. And so he had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to lay hands on Mordecai alone. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes, or Ahasuerus. What do you see happening there? Trouble. What? Trouble. Trouble, yes, trouble.
Genocide.
Okay, genocide. He's planning genocide for a whole nation. Okay, who are these people that are in Persia at this time in history? Who are this group of people? Who have they become?
They were captives taken by King of Babylon, and also this Haman remembers that their nation defeated his nation. Now their nation is a group of slaves in this country. Now's his chance to get even for his country.
Yeah, yes, okay. Yes. But Keith?
Well, was also economics involved in that, as there usually is, in power moves. This gave them, the Jewish people were probably blessed. And so that decree, if I remember right, said you can kill them and you can have their land
Yes, yes.
and their possessions.
Yes, so the Jewish people have been very clear about their role in the government. I mean, you know, Daniel and his three friends, you know, they're part of this thing too. So what I want you to look at Jeremiah 29, verse 5. Jeremiah 29 and verse 5. When the Jews are still in captivity, Jeremiah has some words for them. Someone have that? Jeremiah 29, you can read verses 4 and 5.
Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, all who were carried away captive, whom I have caused to be carried away from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and dwell in them, plant gardens and eat their fruit.
Yeah, so what's God's telling these people to do?
Just stay there and make the best of it.
Yeah, so false prophets are coming into the Jewish community and saying, this is going to be just a very short period of time, you're going to be there. Jeremiah is saying, no, that's false. You're going to be there 70 years. So plant vineyards, build houses, become part of the culture, contribute to the culture. And the Jewish people have made the Persian Empire the wealthy community that it is. They have so invested that they're wealthy, extremely wealthy, because of this. But
Sure doesn't sound to me like they were slaves there,
no,
because they were possibly some of the wealthiest people or very well off. If people could have their land and homes and stuff, there was something to go for.
yeah. So Nebuchadnezzar's philosophy was never to put people in slavery necessarily. He wanted to conquer them and let them have new lives, but they're going to be under their reign and control. So, so the Jewish people have made the Persian Empire a strong community. They've contributed to this. So go back to the story, what's going on here. So Haman is set on destroying all of the Jewish people. So what does he do? So in the month of April, during the 12th year of King Ahasuerus' reign, lots were cast in Haman's presence. The lots were called Purim to determine the best day and month to take action, and the day selected was March 7, nearly a year later. But what has he done now? What is he strategizing to do?
Rich himself
Well, okay, he's gonna,
by destroying them all.
okay. But he's determining a time when this is actually gonna happen. And then I want you to see what his character is in the next verses there. Then Haman approached King Xerxes and said, there is a certain race of people scattered throughout all the provinces of your empire who keep themselves separate from everyone else. Their laws are different from those of any other people, and they refuse to obey the laws of the king. So it is not in the king's interest to let them live. If it please the king, issue a decree that they be destroyed, and I will give 1,000 large sacks of silver to the government administrators to be deposited in the royal treasury. What's he do here? What's showing up about Haman?
He's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Okay, he's robbing Peter to pay Paul. One thing, what else is he doing? So he's stealing to benefit. Yeah, what else is he doing here?
The bribe,
Pardon?
it's a bribe.
Okay, he's bribing him. Okay, what else?
Not giving him the full details because he doesn't realize how big this nation is. It sounds like this people, it could be small. He is not really telling them who they are.
Yes.
And what kind of impact that has on the king's purse.
Yes, so he doesn't reveal who this group of people are that's violating the rules. Okay, so what do you call that?
The media.
Deceptive. Good one.
Deceptive, it's deceptive, okay? So he's telling this story about the Jewish people, but he's not naming who they are. And what is he saying about them?
Their own laws.
They have their own
their
law.
ways, and they don't really
Yes,
obey you, right?
yeah.
It's almost inconceivable to me. Xerxes was probably a bright man to be in the position he was, that he wouldn't have interrogated him a little bit. Who are these people? What's going on? We don't hear any of that.
Yeah. So what's that tell you about Azarias?
Weak.
I mean, it's consistent with what we've seen so far in the book of Esther, isn't it?
He trusted what Haman told him because Haman was the second in the kingdom. In a letter that he wrote, he praised Haman for being very intelligent.
Yes, okay.
He trusted him,
He trusted Haman.
his wisdom.
Uh-huh. What did previously, in the previous two chapters, how did he use the people in his circle?
Give him advice, to make recommendations. So he relies a lot on his people.
Yes, so he didn't have any sense of self himself. He takes everything from everybody else, but he doesn't ask questions. He doesn't explore what Haman's even talking about. Who are these group of people? Who are they really? You know, if he had asked that question, Haman probably couldn't have gotten by with what he did, because Azarias was a very greedy and, you know, loved luxury, loved money. And he didn't tell him something else, because I am sure at this stage, Haman knew who Esther was. And who is Esther?
King's wife.
She is a Jew. And do we now understand what was in chapter 2, where Mordecai is saying to Esther, keep your mouth shut about who you are? Because Mordecai knew who Haman was. Okay? So Mordecai is saying, don't reveal who you are. Keep that a secret. Important point. Yes.
I like how you open up this social structure
Uh-huh.
and open up characters. But there is one character who is not revealed publicly in this book. And he's in charge of every small detail, which we think that they miss or they don't realize. No. Everything was orchestrated and very delicately controlled by God. Why the king didn't ask? Because God blocked this even question in his mind. I mean, it was so obvious to ask for a king what kind of nation it is.
Yeah.
But no, obviously it was God's hand that he didn't ask. Why they took a whole year,
But you can see.
you know, to make it happen, to this decree to come into place. Again, it was hard. If it would happen within a couple of weeks, it could be.
Mhm.
It would be a different story, but it didn't happen again, because in every detail, every small detail, it was God's hand to block or to open or to allow or to not allow. And this is amazing.
So true.
And it gets more beautiful as we go through the story. Yes.
Yeah, I think that we might not even have the book of Esther if Saul had obeyed God and wiped out the, Amalekites, because then Haman wouldn't have been able to survive. And I think one issue people can sometimes struggle with is the God of the Old Testament, and how he would have them like kill all these people. Well, this is an example of when they didn't do that and how it almost threatened the whole, Jewish people at the time. And so it kind of exhibits why God had said destroy them, because when they chose not to, then enemies would arise later, such as with Haman.
So there's systematic intentions on both sides, both evil and good, isn't there? Systematic intentions to destroy God's people and systematic intentions on God's side to protect his people. And that's one of the big themes here in the book of Esther. It's actually profound and gets more. Yes.
2 points. One, we are told when Saul was destroying the Amalekites, he left only the king alive.
Right.
So where did Haman come from? How can he be there? So Saul didn't destroy all the other Amalekites.
Yeah.
At all, even though it says that he did.
Well, it says that he destroyed them from this place to this place. So there's borders, there's people that probably escaped,
Could be.
the people living on the fringe. So yes, it just says that Saul destroyed from here to here. Yeah.
The other feature is this, they had to wait time to be able to carry out the order for this. This empire is huge, as you mentioned. And to be able to carry the message from the capital to all these far-flung places to do the deed on that specific day takes a lot of time. You don't do that in a week
Right.
at that time. It probably takes close to a year to carry that message.
Yes, that's so true. And they didn't have,
They didn't have airplanes and they didn't have that.
social media. Yeah,
They had horses,
yes, but they did have the best horses in the world.
maybe.
Yeah, but it's true. Yeah, right.
I'd like to make a statement about the application. What I see happening in this story is the same thing I see happening in the end time as we get into the earth beast in Revelation 13 as an example. And so I look at this story as being a story of trust. How do we trust when things are falling apart around us? And this helps us see that.
Yes, and you're going to see that more fully as we go through this, Stacy.
This background of who Haman is and his relationship with the Jewish nation sheds a lot of light on a previous conversation we had in class about Esther must have been had some sort of character defect, that she was being so devious and sneaky that she didn't reveal that she was a Jew, as though that was like some ill motive on her part. But now that we know that Mordecai told her this because he knew who Haman was, and he knew about this ancient rivalry, she was just realizing that the guy who's like way up top of the country, if he found out that she was a Jew, she would be in trouble. And so now we see her in a different light, that there was stuff we didn't know when that topic was being discussed about why she was keeping it quiet, that she was Jew. Like there was some devious motive for it, but not. It's just that she just knew that she would be attacked.
And as Mordecai said to her, which we'll look at next week a little bit, who knows, but you've come to the throne for such a time as this. There's big issues going on here. And so Haman is manipulative, he's deceitful, he only gives part of the information, he bribes, all these things with King Xerxes. And what's he do? The king agreed. I want to go back to something because this is really an important point in the story, and then we'll go on. Do you know what March 7 is that year? Do you know what March 7 is? March 7 is the Passover. What happened in the Jewish history on Passover? Why do Jews celebrate Passover?
They were saved.
And they were saved.
Yes, the Passover is a celebration of God's deliverance. So the Jews have, let's say, 9 months 10 months, they've heard about this edict, to think about the date that they're going to die. And they know that the date set for their death is March 7th, the Passover. What does that say to the Jewish people?
Trust God.
Okay, an invitation to trust. What else?
Or saying that God rejected them now,
It is what?
that God has finally rejected them finally.
Oh, okay, so that they might take it internally that this is the end. Yeah, we're done for. Okay? Anything else they might be thinking?
Historically, it was that, it's kind of like Haman challenging who this God was. You think he's so awesome, you think he's so powerful, this is a big deal on March 7, watch this, because that's the day you die. And so then it also would also cause some of them out of fear to question God and his power and his being real if the Passover was supposed to resemble his being able to save them. How are they going to die on that day and cause doubt in their minds?
So
For some.
Yeah, there's probably this conversation going on. I heard another voice back here. Yeah, Ann.
I guess I was thinking, if they still clung to their faith, they would be looking back historically and realizing, wow, maybe this is a sign for God for hope for us. That it's been set on this day when historically, if they had the blood over the mantle, they were saved from the death angel. And so I would think it would be a symbol of hope in a sense, or a sign to them.
But this is back as, it's Andrew, isn't it?
Alexander.
Alexander, okay, Alexander, about God in the details. Who manipulated the lots? Who manipulated the lots? They were doing it in, serving their God, asking their God to do this, but God manipulated the lots to set something, not only to give a message of hope, but of ultimate deliverance.
Powerful.
Pardon?
That's powerful.
It's absolutely powerful. And, if you look at that date, Passover dates, down through Jewish history, and I don't have the details in front of me to give you all this, but many of those times are at Passover, where God has done something significant for his people. Okay, so the king agreed, verse 10, the king agreed, confirms his decision by removing his signet ring from his finger and giving it to Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. The king said, the money and the people are both yours to do with as you see fit. So on April 17, the king's secretaries were summoned and a decree was written exactly as Haman dictated. It was sent to the king's highest officers, the governors of the respective provinces, and the nobles of each province in their own scripts and languages. The decree was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet. Dispatches were sent by swift messengers in all the provinces of the empire, giving the order that all Jews, young and old, including women and children, must be killed, slaughtered, and annihilated on a single day. This was to be scheduled to happen on March 7 of the next year. The property of the Jews would be given to those who killed them. A copy of this decree was to be issued as law in every province and proclaimed to all people so that they would be ready to do their duty on the appointed day. At the king's command, the decree went out by swift messengers, and it was also proclaimed to the fortress of Susa. Then the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa fell into confusion. You have just issued an order for genocide. And you sit down to have a drink. What does that say?
You're cold.
Huh?
Evil.
Yeah, yeah. But what happens in Susa? What happens? Confusion, yeah, John.
Yes, it was confusion. The people are confused because in Xerxes' letter, he wrote that he wanted all of his kingdom to live in peace. Because he trusted Haman, he might have believed that exterminating these people would help the rest of the kingdom live in peace. So he sat down and had a drink and said, hey, I'm celebrating. We're going to have peace. He didn't realize that he was exterminating the people that were actually loyal to him.
Right.
And as far as confusion in the city, I'm sure the people were confused, especially the Jews. I would imagine that the city had numerous Jewish merchants in it.
But can you imagine, these are your neighbors?
Yes.
They're people that you have grown to love and appreciate and respect, and they're people who have contributed to the community. Why would you eliminate these people that have brought us so much prosperity? And can you imagine how people are feeling? Just recently, I had the privilege of sitting down with the Palestinian family at Becky's home. They were teaching us some of their delicious recipes and listening to their story. The gentleman was able to tell us what happened in the 40s. And I'd read a book about this. So, it was just confirming to hear someone that just recently immigrated from there, how that in the 40s, the Israelites and the Palestinians are neighbors. They work in the vineyards together. They work in the olive groves together. They go to school together. The kids play together. And all of a sudden, because of the movement of Zionists, come in and push out the Palestinians, take away their property, take away their schools, basically put them into camps and destroy their livelihood, but destroy the economy of the area because of that. So that's kind of a real life today that's carrying on story that was similar to what Susa, is going through. Yeah.
I think some were not happy. Like, again, we need to understand there are different people. Some were happy about such neighbors, some were not. And some Jews were good people, some Jews were bad people who were taking advantage of the locals. So there were different perspectives. So not every neighbor was happy to have a Jew as a neighbor. Because they were taking their jobs, like what they say nowadays, they were taking their businesses and whatever, and they were jealous. Why this unknown nation such successful in my city while I'm not so successful? So there was some different perspectives.
Yes, I'm sure. We're humans, so. So Haman is set up to do, he is given the authority of the king. The king doesn't take the authority himself. He turns over all of his authority to this wicked Haman. So I want us to read quickly. We won't go into it in detail, but this week we'll go into it more in detail next week. But skip over to chapter 5 and verse 9. Now this is after, chapter 5 and verse 9 happens after Esther's first banquet. Okay. Haman was a happy man as he left the banquet. But when he saw Mordecai sitting at the palace gate, not standing up or trembling nervously before him, I mean, here this decree has already gone out, and Mordecai is still just calm, collected, doing his job, not standing up or trembling nervously before him. Haman becomes furious. However, he restrained himself and went on home. Then Haman gathered together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, and boasted to them about his great wealth. In fact, he was probably more wealthy than the king, and his many children. He bragged about the honors the king had given him and how he had been promoted over all the other nobles and officials. Then Haman added, and that's not all. Queen Esther invited only me and the king himself to the banquet, and she prepared for us. And she has invited me to dine with her and the king again tomorrow. And then he added, but this is all worth nothing as long as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting there at the palace gate. What's with this guy? He's wealthy. He has the highest position in the government. He has many children.
I think he'd be happy.
You'd think he'd be happy, yeah. He was happy that he was invited to the banquet, but all of this means nothing as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting there at the palace gate. So Haman's wife, Zeresh, and all his friends suggested, set up a sharpened pole that stands 75 foot tall, and in the morning ask the king to impale Mordecai on it. When this is done, you can go on your merry way to the banquet with the king. This pleased Haman, and he ordered the pale set up. Who is this guy? What is the primary characteristic of this guy that one person's failure to acknowledge him makes him so furious that he's willing not only to kill Mordecai, but the whole nation? What's the deal?
Let's switch from him to us.
Well, let's
Because from him, we can look at us, you know, with him, it's a done deal, but with us, we still have a hope.
yeah, but we got to identify what his issue is so we can bring it to us. So what is his issue?
Back then, they didn't have cognitive behavioral therapy to identify false thoughts. And the idea behind it that, you know, the same was happening with Cain and Abel. This evil spirit that attacked each one of us.
Okay,
And to identify this spirit with a true thought. What's really going on in my life? And is this problem is so magnificent that I'm focusing only on this issue? Or, I mean, he was a simple human being, the same as all of us.
Yeah.
Only he allowed this evil spirit to attack him so much that he was possessed.
Yeah.
And that's it.
okay. A hand back here. Yes.
Well, I just think it goes back to in heaven when Lucifer had all the angels, a third of the angels with him, because he didn't like Jesus being so close to God.
So what is that named?
Pride.
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 Yeah, so his issue was pride.
Domination.
Okay, so his issue is pride, the source of all evil.
He wants to be
Yes,
worshipped.
okay. John, was your,
Yeah, in fact, that's what I was gonna say. I mean, it makes me think, all right, what characteristics of Haman do I have? And what am I gonna do about that?
yes,
So it brings it to life today.
yes.
I mean, where do I ever look at somebody as lesser than me? Do I ever, where does pride infect my behaviors and my decisions? Because whenever we talk about self-serving, that's the infection that's in there, I think, is pride. And one of the most powerful things that Christ taught us was the importance of humility. And so, these people did this because they could. And they looked down on people because they thought they were better. And they thought they were God or had the characteristics of God. And so I think you hit the nail on the head. Pride is an infection that we're all vulnerable to, and we have to be careful because we may be no different than some of the characteristics of Haman, and we need to do something about that within ourselves.
So, C.S. Lewis, great Christian writer, I'm sure you're all familiar with, has a chapter called Pride. He says this: pride gets no pleasure about having something, but only having more of it than the next person. You may think you're proud about being successful or good looking, but you're not, because when you are surrounded by other people with as much or more success, wealth, or looks, you lose all pleasure in them. And that's what is going on here with Haman. He loses all pleasure in any of the beauty, any of the wealth, any of the authority and position that he has. He gets no satisfaction from his accomplishments in his position. He wants respect for himself above everything else. So let's look at Satan himself. I think this is an important connection for us to make. Ezekiel 28. Lost my verse. I thought it was verse 12. Verse 12. Son of man, sing this funeral song from the king of Tyre. Give him this message from the sovereign Lord. You are the model of perfection, full of wisdom and exquisite in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Your clothing was adorned with every precious stone, red carnelian, pale green peridot, white moonstone, blue and green beryl, onyx, green jasper, with a whole lot list, I can't pronounce them all, turquoise and emerald, all beautifully crafted for you and set in the finest scroll. Then they were given to you on the day you were created. I ordained and appointed you as the mighty angelic guardian. You had access to the holy mountain God and walked among the stones of fire. You were blameless in all you did from the day you were created until the day evil was found in you. Your rich commerce led you to violence and you sinned. So I banished you in disgrace from the mountain of God. I expelled you, O mighty guardian, from your place among the stones of fire. Your heart was filled with pride because of all your beauty. Your wisdom was corrupted by your love of splendor. So I threw you to the ground and exposed you to the curious gaze of kings.
And some versions say instead of evil, pride.
Yes.
Until pride was found in you.
Yes, until pride was found in you. Pride is the root of all evil, and it always leads to violence. It always leads to violence. So from pride, you go through manipulation and lying and control, and you progression down until violence is the outcome. And we see that most manifested at the cross.
Pride destroys empathy.
Okay, good point.
And empathy is where it's at. That's how God connects with it.
That's a pertinent point. Pride destroys empathy. You gonna make another comment?
No. Well, maybe.
I can see a story on your face.
Yeah, I still think, we have to, what's really important to me about this is that I want to have application to it.
Yes.
I want to find out what I can get out of this. And so it makes me think about, well, how can I practice in my life behaviors that take pride away, that moves pride away from me. And what comes to mind is, for example, being sensitive to the disenfranchised. Being sensitive to, even in leadership, that's your job title. I mean, that's you, I have responsibilities, but those responsibilities are no less important than someone else's responsibilities that may report to me. It's just our role. It's what we do. It's not even, I can't even say it is more important because it's not.
No.
And so
It's in a circle. It's not in a hierarchy.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It's not, or that's another way of looking. It's more horizontal. And so I think that it's really important, particularly for people in this room, because we have some very successful people in this room by society standards, that we take it upon ourselves to understand that that's a gift and that we earn nothing. And we have to do something with it. And the first sensitive thing that comes to my mind is, what am I doing to raise my community up? Which is, it makes me think about the disenfranchised. That makes me think about people that are challenged, that are in pain. Maybe even have an injection of evil in them, and maybe there's something I can do to surgically take that out of them, to be helpful.
So, we can contrast Haman to Jesus, can't we? Who was Jesus? What does he, in Philippians 2, where it has a description of what he did, what does that say? It's the opposite.
Right.
Right. And Matthew kind of makes this point in the book of Matthew. Jesus is one with us. He joins the circle with us, and he's bringing the lowest up and he's bringing the highest down.
From a practical perspective, who's more powerful, Haman or Jesus? Jesus. Why? Jesus was humble. Haman was prideful. It's the opposite. Humility, this fights this is counter. Humility makes you more powerful in your community. But you're not doing it to be powerful.
No.
That's not your intent. That's not your motive, but it happens. So that evil always has the opportunity to sneak in. And that's why we have to practice this.
Well, we look at the story of Mordecai saving the life of the king. But does he ask for notoriety as a result of that? He continues for 5 years. 5 years sitting at the gate, doing his daily job. 5 years before his act is ever acknowledged.
There is a course out there, I've taught it, a leadership course on how to lead like Jesus.
Okay.
2 key words. Well, actually, there's more, but 2, pride and fear. And either one is very harmful to a leader. You can be very fearful and do nothing. Never step out, hide, or you can be very prideful and eventually fall from your pride.
Good point. Wendy?
Yeah, I just want to say for myself, going along with what John was saying, I'm intrigued that Mordecai kept doing what he was supposed to be doing, irrespective of what the future was holding. And I'm also intrigued that this guy Haman is so volatile. He goes from, oh, I get to be with the king in this banquet and the queen to this. And I'm thinking to myself, John asked the question, what about myself? You know, am I coming to church? I mean, there are people here that I don't like, none of you.
What I'm saying, so you say.
But, you know, I have people that sometimes I think to myself, man, I wish I would sit over there on the balcony in the far corner and I could be over here. And this is challenging me to think, you know, am I looking forward to the banquet with the king?
Mhm.
Or am I more in, my mind is going to this hate or this dislike of somebody? And I guess what I'm coming out of this lesson is that I need to be like Mordecai, just steady. And I think that's why Jesus says, love your enemies, pray for your enemies.
Yes, and you can't hate someone unless you're prideful.
Well, okay.
You know,
Thank you for telling me that.
all of us struggle with this when it's not, but hate, pride, hate grows out of pride.
Yeah.
You know, when you think you're better than someone else, you know, you put them down or marginalize.
There's
Okay,
a distinct difference between hating somebody and not liking them.
Yes,
Hating is you want to hurt them and you loathe them and you wish bad things from them. Disliking people because they're just like really rotten, stinking people, that's okay, but just as long as you're nice to them.
yeah, but you still have to love them.
Exactly.
And that's just it. So there's the tug, and that's what I talked about in my last lesson.
Yeah.
How do I love somebody that I don't like?
From a distance.
And I can't. I figured out I can't.
That's right.
That's, you know.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
okay,
that's,
we're
that's a first.
running over time, but
Help you.
I think Roy had his hand up here for a minute.
Big controversy. First Adam, second Adam. First Adam gave us self because of sin. Second Adam takes it away by his grace. And so that's what we have to focus on.
I hope this has been helpful to you.
I'm not going to give a controversial statement, but I just want us to know that we don't have the privilege of having the Edwards with us much longer.
Yeah.
And so they are leaving our wonderful group and moving away. So we want to pray for them. I'm not sure whether they'll be here next Sabbath or not, but I know that we will miss them.
Yeah, well, we hope to celebrate their friendships. Okay, let's pray. Lord, forgive us for our pride. Forgive us for our hatred of others who stand in our way. And just write your heart on ours, that we may serve you and bring glory to your name. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
You and I agree on those.
See you next week.
That was good.